Um, Welcome everybody to Northwest Indiana Green Drinks. And besides our speaker that I'm excited about, I'm also really very excited that we are beginning our 14th year, which to me doesn't even seem possible. And I want to acknowledge Kathy Sipple because she's the one that started this in the city of Valparaiso a very long time ago. And then we moved it to Michigan City. And then during the pandemic, we got the idea of, well, yeah, we can do this and let's do it virtually. And we had such a positive response. We've continued doing it that way. So happy birthday to Northwest Indiana Green Drinks. Yay. Um, I am going to hand it over to M, who's going to do housekeeping items for us. Thank you, M.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Nancy. Welcome, everybody. Thank you to everyone for joining us here on Zoom. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, you've got a little bit of a lag between, but thanks for joining us there too. Just so everyone knows, this meeting and presentation is being recorded, and we ask that everyone remain muted throughout the presentation, but feel free to drop any questions or comments that come up throughout in the chat here on Zoom or on Facebook comments on that page if you're watching over there. We will hopefully have time at the end to get to all of them. We really love the conversations that come out of Green Drinks presentations, and we're happy to have that conversations and topics at the end. And as always, these are all recorded and then reshared on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, which I will drop the link to that in the chat here so you can go back and rewatch many past seasons of Green Drinks recordings that live on our YouTube page. And without further ado, I'll hand it back to you, Nancy, to introduce our presenter.
Thank you. And I did forget something. I forgot to mention who our sponsors are. So I'll do that first. These events are co-sponsored by Save the Dunes, Michigan City Sustainability Commission, and supported by Northwest Indiana Region Resilience. All three of us come together to make this possible. This month's hosts are 95.1 FM AM 1420 WIMS in Michigan City. I want to give a shout out to Rick Federici, who actually gave us a special post on their radio station page. And also the Beecher, which is a publication which comes out of Michigan City. Drew Talixon also gave us a special post on his Facebook page for their publication. Also, we would have to say that the Indiana Dunes National Park is, of course, one of our hosts this month, since Betsy's going to be talking about them a lot. I want to introduce, I'm just going to say this, Betsy, you are like my favorite person. Okay.
You're
And I
one of
know
my
that
favorite
I,
people
I,
too,
I
Nancy.
know, I
Really
know I have a lot of favorite people on here, and I know I offended just a whole bunch of people, but I've just had so much joy working with you the last 4 years. And Betsy's the executive director of Save the Dunes. And what she has accomplished is moving a lot of what I would call wish list items that the organization has had for decades. And like, we wanted to do this, we wanted to do that. It's so important that we get involved in this. And Betsy has just taken that wish list and is just checking it off so quickly. It's mind blowing how much she's gotten done. And I know that she's going to be sharing a lot of some of the things we accomplished this past year together. I have to acknowledge my board. They are an unbelievable group of hardworking and really dedicated individuals. And Betsy also has an outstanding staff. So it's all of us coming together and having the same vision, sharing it, and doing anything and everything we can do to actualize that. So Betsy, hats off to you. Kudos. We absolutely could not do it without you. And I hope you realize how much we appreciate you from the bottom of our hearts. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself if there's anything you want, our attendees to know. I'll let you share that. Okay.
sure. Thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Nancy. You already said what I would say, which is that we have an outstanding staff and board at Save the Dunes. And I feel so fortunate to have joined at a moment where, the right people are on the bus and a lot of incredible things happen when that is the case. And so I think that so much of our success is really just about making sure the right people are focused on the right things, and then it just takes care of itself from there. So it's very, very exciting to be part of Save the Dunes right now, and I'm really thrilled today to be able to talk about some of the projects that we have underway and what's ahead for us. So should I get started then? Should I share my screen?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I was going to ask, yeah, okay. I'm excited to find out what this S period, A period, V period, E period thing is. So
Yes. Okay.
Betsy
Well, I
Betsy
will,
wouldn't tell me, so I've been
not
in,
intentionally, but maybe we
in the
need to get
dark now for, a month, if not longer.
Well, I'll dive in then and I'll get into that's in the middle of my presentation. So let me just get started. So everybody can see my screen, correct? Okay, great. So here's what we're going to talk about. Just in case there are any new people in the room, I always like to start off my presentations with some information about the Indiana Dunes and what makes them so special. And then I'll talk about that acronym that's based on our organization's name and founding rally cry. And then I'll get into some of the projects that we have underway right now, as well as some of the really exciting things that we have plotted for our vision moving ahead. And then I'll finish up with some ways to get involved. Um, I I want to say this now, and I'll say this again at the end, that none of the work that we do would be possible if it weren't for the support of our incredible members and donors and partners. You cannot save the dunes just with, the 6 employees and 13 board members that we have at Save the Dunes. It's certainly a community effort, and so much of our work is driven by all of you that have joined today. So I welcome questions. I also hope that Nancy and Jacob and jump in when we get to the questions and talk about these great projects, many of which they're spearheading. So first, let's talk about the dunes and what makes them so special. Um, Lake Michigan was formed by our glaciers, so the Wisconsin glacier specifically is what's responsible for how we have our lake and therefore our Indiana dunes. What happens is there are currents coming down both the east and the west shorelines of Lake Michigan. If you think about our lake in how it compares to other Great Lakes, we have the tall, long lake, right? So that's a lot of space and energy for wind and currents to pick up. And then the lucky state of Indiana gets the deposits of those things. So that is why we have sandy shores. If you visit the northern part of the lake, in places like the UP, you'll see rockier shorelines. And so if you think about that context, you also get very sandy shores in Michigan. But our dunes are made of 100% sand. So they've been mined to the ground. We have a history of that in some spaces. And so we have this really fine sand. Some of you have maybe heard of singing sands, and you get this unique sound when you even walk on our sand. So the dunes are constantly shifting because of the dynamics that I talked about. So the waves bring the sand up onto the beach, and then it's the winds that carry the sand upward. So if you see in this picture here how there's vegetation, that you need vegetation and wind. Those are the two important ingredients in order to have dunes. So you can see that everything leading up to that vegetation is relatively flat. Our dunes, some of the tallest dunes are up to 200 feet tall and can be found in our state park, which is in the central part of Northwest Indiana. But we have dunes throughout the entire coast of our shoreline, which spreads through Lake Porter and LaPorte County. And we have currently 15 miles of protected shoreline through the state and national park, as well as 16,000 acres beyond just the shoreline. So there's a lot more to explore than just the beaches. There's also 50 miles of hiking trails, and I am on a personal journey to get onto every single one of those trails. I'm sure many of you are as well. I'm getting through the list too. It's great. So one of the other really unique things about Northwest Indiana and our ecosystems is that we have a lot of biodiversity. Our park is actually the fifth most biologically diverse national park in the entire North America. And that is because you have the convergence of a lot of different ecosystems right in this particular spot. So you, of course, have those coastal ecosystems that we just were talking about, but we also have wetlands and several rivers, prairies. Think of the prairie state coming and sort of ending right in this space, and then the forests coming from the eastern states and sort of meeting up with the prairie, and that creates a very unique and globally rare habitat called dune, black oaks savanna habitat. You can get several oak habitats that are savannas in this area. And we even have something called boreal relics, and that is from those glacial times. There used to be plants like jack pines and other evergreen type plants that would grow in this area, but are no longer found generally this far south. But because of the dynamics and diversity of this area and the dynamics from the lake and the lake effect weather that we get, you can still get those boreal relics in the dunes. So there's a lot of really cool things to find. Henry Chandler Coles was a famous scientist who founded the concept of ecology here in Northwest Indiana. He studied dune succession, which is the process of, a plant ecosystem existing and then dying and something else coming in its place. And you can really see that even with your naked eye, and when you really look from the lake inward, you can sort of see it in this picture here, where you have dunes way in the front, and then you have mirum grass, and then you have these cottonwoods that love that space. And then if this picture stretched a little bit further, then you would see mature dunes, which are covered in forests. So that concept was founded here in the Indiana Dunes. And in addition to the black oak savannas that I mentioned that are globally rare, we also have something called dune and swale habitat, which is also globally rare. And you can find these short dune and then wetland and then dune and then wetland formations. It's often described as a corduroy design, and I like to say they're abnormally long. So you can just, when you're looking down it just looks like a straight dune and then a straight, almost river-like, and then another dune. So you have that ecosystem here. You can see that in Miller Woods and some of the other state protected areas in Lake County. So there's so many incredible things to explore in the Indiana Dunes, and that's the reason they needed to be saved. That's why there was a movement to establish a national park, and that's why we're still protecting this area to this day. So I want to share with you something that I actually came up with several years ago when I started at Save the Dunes. I started 4 years ago, which was based on our, rallying cry and founding name, which I think encompasses what our organization does. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of walk you through that acronym, and then I'll walk you through the examples after that of the projects that support this work. So, but before I do, I actually want to just, again, in case people aren't familiar with our history, give you just a brief overview. So our organization was founded by Dorothy Buell in 1952. She gathered a group of local women in her home, and they established the Save the Dunes Council with the effort to create a national park to protect the remaining undeveloped dunes. And it was a monumental task. She was the right woman at the right time. And they did this because there was destruction of dunes happening. There, I mentioned mining was happening. We also saw the um, movement of industry coming into Northwest Indiana and wanting to use the shoreline for business needs and take advantage of that access to the lake for all the steel building. We also have a refinery in the area. For a long time, our utility company heavily relied on lakefront access as well. So there was a lot of dune destruction to make way for these businesses. So Dorothy Buell, as I mentioned, she led the movement for establishing an Indiana Dunes National Park. She enlisted with the help of Senator Paul Douglas, which you can see in this bottom picture, is pictured in the center along with Dorothy. He was dubbed the third senator from Indiana. He's actually from Illinois and was instrumental in introducing many bills and what finally accumulated in the passage of a national lake shore in 1966. So this duo, the Education Center in Miller Woods is actually named after Paul Douglas, and then the Visitor Center in Porter County for Indiana Dunes is named after Dorothy Buell. So these are our founders, and we owe so much to them. And so I mentioned that the park was created, the National Lakeshore was created in 1966. There were several expansion bills, four to be exact, between 1966 and then our present time. And in 2019, the park was redesignated as a national park, capital P. And since that time, our visitation has boomed from nearly 2 million to 3 million people to the national park. And it generates an estimated $206 million in local economic activity for gateway communities that surround the park. So it's an economic engine in and of itself. And again, our founders, we have so much to thank them for and the foresight that they saw in preserving this space. You know, the argument at the time was that we wanted to use it for economic gain, but now we see that just preserving it alone has created economic gains for our state. It's the #1 tourist destination in the state of Indiana, which I think is pretty remarkable. So, Save the Dunes, our rallying cry. I want to walk you through what I mean when I say S.A.V.E. So I think that this can summarize, when I first wrote this, I wrote it as a personal vision statement. And I think it summarizes and encapsulates the work that we do. So each letter represents something. So the first letter is support, and that is specifically to support the state and the national parks. So I'm just going to read you something that I wrote. After years of our advocacy, much of the dunes are now under the protection of the national and state parks. This makes these parks our most important partner. Our support will manifest in many forms, whether it be partnering on grants, collaborating on conservation action plans and restoration projects, or raising community awareness about the parks. No single organization can save the dunes on their own, but when we join together with our parks and local partners, we amplify our message and can continue to protect and restore this precious place. That is S. The next one, I kind of want to make you guys guess what the next one is going to be. Maybe we could do that in the chat if anybody wants to drop in their guesses, make you work for it a little bit before I move on. If I can access my chat box, maybe somebody else can read them aloud.
Someone guessed advocate, advocacy.
You got it. That's right. Advocate. So the A stands for advocate for the national, advocate for greater protections for the Indiana Dunes and Lake Michigan watershed. So establishing the Indiana Dunes as a national park was an important step, but there is still much work to be done to protect the dunes and surrounding areas from the many threats they still face. The Indiana Dunes are one of the most fragmented national parks in our nation, and many ecosystems within it still need further restoration to survive and thrive. Local industrial and residential pollution create constant threats to these unique ecosystems, as well as the residents of Northwest Indiana. Additionally, climate change has changed the weather patterns in the area, impacting the local fauna and flora, so it can't flourish without human intervention. So Save the Dunes will be the #1 advocate for the dunes at the local, state, and federal level until these threats are fully addressed. We will also train advocates, including the next generation of conservation leaders, to advocate for these special places. So that's A. All right. Any guesses now for what V stands for?
Kathy guessed visit them or value them.
Visit, value, those would be good ones. They're not what I chose, but they were good guesses. Any others?
Vision.
Vision. It's not vision. All right. What's that?
Voice.
You got it. Voice. Voice is the next one. So we will be the voice of the dunes. So nature cannot speak for itself, so we will speak for it. Our staff of experts will educate others on what is happening in the dunes and what it all means. This will range from celebration of small victories of recent restoration projects to explaining the implications of a recent environmental event. We will create opportunities for people to connect with the dunes and nearby natural areas through our various communication outlets and programming opportunities. Whether we are talking with new audiences or our greatest fans, Save the Dunes will help others understand what makes the dunes special and the struggles and successes that happen on the Northwest shores of Indiana each day. All right, there's one more. E. Does anybody, I didn't put up B yet. Any guesses for E?
Educate.
Good guess. Not quite.
Embrace.
Embrace. It's not embrace, but I like that word.
Environment.
Not environment.
Evolve.
Ooh, I like that one, but it's not evolve.
Envision.
Envision. Oh, these are all great words.
Exercise. Yeah, lots
Oh,
of
I love that one.
Yeah.
That is not what I chose either. All right. If there's no final guesses, drum roll, please. The last word is M. I feel like you should know it. You got to guess?
I should know it because you told me, but I forgot.
Well, guess what? It's your job. It's engage. Engage with our community. So the Indiana Dunes are a beautiful and majestic destination that we want all audiences to enjoy. Unfortunately, these environmental wonders have not been historically accessible to everyone, which is why we are committed to breaking down barriers to those who have not been able to or do not know the dunes or they were not available to them. This will take many forms. To start, we'll support the national park with their accessibility efforts and engage with our local communities to find out what barriers they need help removing or what offerings are popular and they want to see more of. Organizations who share these goals will become an even more partner for us in the years to come. By celebrating the unique perspectives and experiences of everyone, we hope to make the dunes a place that is accessible for all. So that is, I think, encapsulates a lot of the work that we do. And as I said, I actually wrote that a really long time ago, and I came across it's got chicken scratch. I came across it. I was cleaning up my desk recently, and I read it. I was like, wow, it's still completely right. So I felt like that meant it had lasting power and it should be shared today. So now I'd like to walk you through examples of how we bring this vision to life each and every day with our work. So here's a beautiful picture of lupin in bloom at Miller Woods. Again, I encourage you to check this space out. You can almost see that dune and swale that I'm describing. Like here's a dune. Can you see my cursor? And then down here, you would get a wetland. So if you haven't been to Miller Woods, I encourage you to check it out. Okay, so our current work is focused in Lake Porter and LaPorte County. Our headquarters are here in Michigan City. And I just wanted to quickly share our current mission statement with everyone. I think it's a really powerful and good statement, which is to protect and advocate for the Indiana Dunes, Lake Michigan, and surrounding natural areas for the health and vitality of the environment and the people who live, work, and recreate in Northwest Indiana. So this is our charter, so to speak, that drives the decisions that we make every single day on what we're going to work on and who we're going to engage with. Our core programs are focused in 3 buckets, which are conservation, advocacy, and community engagement. As I share these examples, I'll try to point out what falls into each category. So first up, I wanted to share some examples of the habitat restoration and preservation projects that we have. All of these pictures are taken with partners like the National Park. So this picture on the left is when we went out and helped clear invasive autumn olive at Tolston Dunes. If anybody's been to Tolston Dunes, it's a really wonderful place. It's one of the first places I actually hiked in the dunes. And so it's a special place to me. And this work was funded through a large federal grant that we secured on behalf of the national park. So that's a very common thing that we do to carry out our conservation work, is going after and securing these federal grants, which are often multi-year grants, to do restoration work, and then we will administer those grants. Sometimes we will even oversee the contractors that we hire to go out into the park and carry out that work. And then we do all the reporting and whatnot as well. So this is an efficient way for the park to focus on just taking care of the land and take some of that administrative burden off of them. The examples on the top right, this is M, helping to clear some invasives on one of the properties that S.A.V.E. the Dunes owns. So S.A.V.E. the Dunes still does own some land. We often play a broker role rather than a long-term stewardship role with land. So over the many years of our organization's existence, we have secured land and then later passed that on to the long-term stewards of those lands, be it the national park, the Department of Natural Resources. We've given them several pieces of property. Just recently, we donated 5 properties to Shirley Hines Land Trust. You'll see a press release come out about that actually next week. So this land brokerage is a role that we play, but then while the land is in our care, we also want to make sure it's well taken care of. So we'll do restoration work while on the properties. And then in the bottom right picture is an example of a longstanding partnership that we've had with the National Park, NUEPA, Northwest Indiana Paddling Association, and Shirley Hines Land Trust to do log jam clearing along the east branch of the Little Calumet River. And so this is habitat restoration work, but it's also public access work. We're trying to open up all 11 miles of the river for paddling, and we have been successful in opening 9 of those 11 miles. This river was especially impacted by the emerald ash borer disease that we had devastate many of the ash trees in the area. And so a lot of those fell into the river and created these log jams. And so it's been a monumental task to uproot those. And so we've sunk several $1 million into restoring this river collectively through this partnership, but it's really outstanding work. I encourage you to come out for a paddle with us sometime so you can see it firsthand. And then here's another valued partner, is actually NIPSCO. Not necessarily who you would think of first when you think of a conservation partner, but given the fragmentation of our environment in this area, The rights of ways, so this is an example of rights of way where you can see the power lines uh, serve as really important habitat corridor opportunities. So the rivers are one of those spaces, but this is a really excellent land opportunity to do connectivity work, especially around pollinators. I heard monarchs were mentioned earlier. So providing places for plants and animals to be able to move as they need to in these spaces is critical. So this is a before and after picture. This is again funded through large-scale federal grants that Save the Dunes helps to secure and then administer. So this one specifically is largely funded through Great Lakes Restoration Initiative dollars. So those are some conservation bucket examples of the work that we're doing. Now I want to give you a few advocacy examples. So we, as I mentioned, are focused at the local, state, and national level. So we do advocacy in all forms, and about many things, but all directly tied to protecting the Indiana dunes. So if there's a threat to the dunes, we're there to respond to it. So this left-hand picture is an example of an industrial spill out of Burns Harbor. This is the Port of Indiana area. As the park was created, there was something called the Kennedy Compromise, and the Port of Indiana was also approved to be developed. And since then, several, major industrial facilities have moved into that space. And so the new threat that came from that, first it was fighting to make sure that land wasn't destroyed. Now that threat has evolved to addressing pollution events that unfortunately do happen when you have industry in such close proximity to nature and specifically a national park. It's a really tricky dynamic. And for that reason, there are a lot of eyes on industry here in Northwest Indiana. I think we're actually uniquely positioned to figure out how to sustainably live together. So in recent years, we've become much more engaged directly with industry and trying to find collaboration opportunities and ways to influence culture to voluntarily bring down permitted pollution levels and things like that. So that is a wing of our work that our government affairs and policy manager, Harshini, heads up. And this picture is an example of unfortunately, a spill that happened in 2019. So I think that, anybody who's visited our lake knows that things are improving. The lake is clearer with each passing year. Things get incrementally better, but we still, unfortunately, do have these events that occur, and there are permits that are approved that are above, permitted levels, or they're called variances, and so we're working diligently to hold industry accountable to bring down those pollution events. This can often take place at the federal level as well. So we're working directly with industry locally, but a lot of those regulations are determined out of Washington, and so we keep a close eye on policies that would impact those permitted levels. This is an example of some updates that we shared last year about changes to the Clean Water Act. So those are examples of federal advocacy, local and federal advocacy. The center picture is an area that we focus heavily on at the state level, which is wetland protections. If you're not familiar, the state of Indiana, before we were known for our cornfields, we were known for our wetlands. We were dubbed the Everglades of the Midwest. And so unfortunately, many of those have been filled. And so it's really critical that we protect the remaining wetlands that do exist. They play a really important role in filtering out those pollutants that I just described, as well as dealing with runoff and other ways that pollutants can get into our environment. They produce, oxygen for us, and they are an important resting place for a lot of the species that migrate through this area as well as live here year-round. So wetland protections are very important for our state and something that we focus on at Save the Dunes. And then this last picture here is an example of the advocacy that we do each year. Last year, we actually went out to DC 3 times. Historically, we've gone out there once a year since we've been, for 14 years at least, since we've been the state lead for the Healing Our Waters Coalition for that long. All right, and hopefully I'm doing good on time. Let me just take a peek here. Okay, so then I want to shift into engagement opportunities and the ways that we engage with our community. So we do host a lot of hikes. M is often the one that's leading those and is very fun to go out in the dunes with. So I highly encourage you to use that as an excuse to visit the dunes. Some of our hikes are just purely fun and recreational. Some are much more informative, where we bring experts with us or are facilitating those for special events like conferences that are in the area and whatnot. This picture in the center here is an example of we brought all of our all of our federal representatives. So Congressman Mervan, Senator Young, Senator Braun, staff from both of their offices on a tour of the Indiana Dunes National Park, hosted with the National Park staff. So I put this under community engagement because this is educational. We weren't even talking about any policies on this visit. It's just about getting these community and business leaders out to the dunes so that they can see with their own eyes what a special place this is and the challenging threats that we face in protecting it, and so that we can continue to communicate and collaborate with them moving ahead on ways to address those things together. And we also provide a lot of free education resources, which you can find on our website. I like to call it a new website, but it has been a few years now since we updated it, but it still feels very new to me. So we have a wonderful resource tab that I encourage you to check out with a lot of shareable fact sheets. We have our well-known Living in the Dunes guides, where we create sample garden designs that you can implement into your yard to attract pollinators. Or we just wrapped up or are in the process of wrapping up a third guide that is focused on gardening for birds. So attracting birds and supporting bird wildlife with your choices in your backyard. All of those things, again, are so important in this region because it is so fragmented. So these are the little things that everyone as a community member can do to support the dunes. So that wraps up that is not everything that we do, but that is the taste of most of what we do. There are many specific projects that we have going on, but now I want to kind of zoom out and talk a little bit more broadly about what's ahead for us. So much of that will stay, but there's also so much that is pulling us forward amidst changing dynamics and new threats that nobody expected. So our vision ahead, I want to really put a spotlight right now on how important it is that we are supporting the national park. So earlier last year, we entered into what's called a philanthropic partnership agreement, where we became what's called an official partner of the park. That means we have, certain financial milestones that we have to meet and give to the park each year. So we have always partnered with the park. We have a long-standing history of advocating first for the creation of the park, then being involved in several expansion bills. And then as we got most of the land that was, national park level land into conservation, then we shifted into this, okay, we need to preserve and protect this space long-term, and we need to steward this land and do this restoration work that needs to happen. So that has been such a focus for us for the past 20 years, I would say, is doing really a lot of this, like I was describing before, federal grant administration of multi-million-dollar grants over several years so that we can carry out this large-scale restoration work. Because if you're not familiar, restoration work it's never done. But it's certainly not something that you can start and stop. You have to be very deliberate. You have to pick areas that you want to focus on, and then you commit to those areas for at least 5, usually 10 years, in order to eradicate the invasives that may be in that space. Because if you just treat it and then walk away, they just come right back. So it's a really challenging thing to carry out large scale restoration around 16,000 acres, which is in the national park. So we're going through it piece by piece. Currently, about 30% of the park is actively managed. I would love to see that be 100%. It's going to take a while though for us to get there. So this is a long-term vision. We will not be walking away from that commitment for restoration, but we also know that the park needs help beyond just restoration projects in the dunes. They need help with public access work. They need help with updating their exhibits, which haven't been updated, some of them since the park was created. And there's new signage. Half of the signs that are in the park still say National Lakeshore, even though we have a national park status now, and don't effectively orient people to the places that they need to be, and where to park and what to do. And so these are the things that we are committed to also supporting the park with now as a philanthropic partner. So you can see examples of the restoration work that we're doing. is heading up this really fantastic plastic reduction grant that we have in partnership with the park to specifically address getting plastics out of the park. This is not just let's get recycling bins there. This takes educating the community on packing in and packing out, and is a really complex thing. And then in that top right picture, you can see last year we donated accessible beach wheelchairs to the park. And so this is now available for free if you call ahead and rent this directly through the park. So we're really excited to make these special places available to people who haven't maybe before now been able to visit them because of those barriers. So this is a really important focus that will be, long-term putting a lot of energy into. And I'll have a lot more to share about this probably in a couple months. So I hope you continue to stay engaged with us on this work specifically in the near term. But the other thing that the park really needs right now is also advocacy. So this is separate from our philanthropic agreement. We've always been an advocacy organization. It's something we take a lot of pride in, and we are committed to also continuing. And so advocating on behalf of the national park is something that we've also really ramped up and expect that we'll continue to be doing in the long vision ahead. So in this picture, I think I saw Matt earlier, president of Dunes Learning Center, came out with us to DC. So we have many partners doing this as well, this important advocacy work. So you can see us pictured here in front of the Capitol, where we went out for National Park's Hill Day to talk about our park and the appropriations that can support it and the funding that they provide to partners that support the national park. We also talked about GOA, which is Great American Outdoor Acts, now known as Legacy Restoration Fund. And so that's funding. We received $22 million, the national park did, to restore 3 historic buildings that are located within the dunes. So this is a picture of the House of Tomorrow with no windows. There are now windows across the whole thing. It's really beautiful. You should definitely drive by it. So that work was completed because of this. We also have updates happening to the Camp Goodfellow Lodge located at the Dunes Learning Center headquarters, which is part of the national park, and also the Bailey Homestead, which actually was protected and a National Historic Landmark before the park was even created. The National Lakeshore was created. So it's an outstanding part of the park as well. So we're really excited to see resources being poured in. Save the Dunes is committed to raising funds for the park, but the money that we all raise locally to support our local park is still not going to be enough. And that's why you still need to maintain the advocacy for things like these GOA funds and fully appropriating funds for National Park Service and Department of Interior, and all of those things are critically important to also be strong and advocate for. And then I wanted to also put a highlight on our work protecting the shoreline. So Save the Dunes has long championed defending the public trust doctrine, which is the right that all Hoosiers have to access and use the beach for various recreational purposes, especially walking. This is a real challenging thing. We're seeing a lot of public trust work cropping up across the Great Lakes as more privatization attempts are happening along the shoreline. And it's natural reasons why that's happening, but there are, we're really committed to public access and making sure that these dunes remain natural. The most resilient beach is a natural beach, especially, again, if you think about those dynamics that I was talking about earlier with those the flow of the currents that come down to our lake. The reason that we have such a long lake, we get huge storms off of our shoreline. And then you have this natural fluctuation in lake levels. It used to be on a 30-year cycle, and now that has really changed and is less predictable, and you're getting more extremes of those. And so what that's doing is creating it's putting erosion challenges on hyperdrive. And that's another reason why you're seeing armoring of the shoreline, like this picture here in Ogden Dunes that already has a half-mile of its shoreline completely hardened to protect the homes on the other side of those rocks. So earlier this year, last year, technically, we received news on a longstanding legal battle that we've had about phase 2 of this particular project in Ogden Dunes that thanks to our legal pressure, the town abandoned their permit and is no longer planning to build the stone revetment. So this was a hard-fought legal battle that we're really excited about. But, DNR still, we need to still, the question of if they unlawfully issued this permit, on public land without properly delineating that natural ordinary high water mark that you can see pictured here where that vegetation starts. That question still remains unanswered. And so we established a, precedent with our Gunderson case that is the definition and that's what needs to be upheld. But the actual practice of that is not happening. And so that's why we need to continue to stay vigilant in this space and ensure that we are not allowing for, these unlawful permits to go unchecked from DNR, who is responsible for upholding the public's rights along the shoreline. So that brings me to my last few things I wanted to highlight, which is this next project is actually Jacob, our newest staff member on the call here tonight, is heading up this work. So we are very excited that we received a multi-million-dollar or just shy of $1 million grant in partnership with Shirley Hines Land Trust to do national, oh my gosh, I'm getting my words all messed up, to do coastal resiliency work along the shoreline with what's called a National Coastal Resiliency Fund funds. So not my most eloquent explanation of what that grant is. It's a very complicated grant. What I'll try to break it down. Save the Dunes has long done conservation planning regionally for Northwest Indiana. And so what that looks like is identifying the threats to our ecosystems, but also the ways that you can address those threats and thinking about that, not just from an environmental lens, but also what are the impacts on community. And so you put these into what are called conservation action plans. And we've worked and brought partners together to create several years ago what was called I can't even remember what it was called, but it was a joint conservation action plan of 9 different action plans that you can see identified here. So Heart of Calumet, Little Calumet, those are actually on the Illinois side, West Branch, Hoosier Prairie, Hobart, Marsh, Deep River. Indiana Dunes is its own space in that. So that's the area that we focus, but we are working with conservation partners across this entire region that specialize in each of these areas to create action plans that complement each other. And so that was a big undertaking in and of itself to get everybody using the same language and looking at things through the same lens and to get that many partners working at such a regional level. But it's paid off because now we have this regional funding that we've been able to tap into to do large scale projects like this. So the project that Jacob's heading up is focused specifically on working with EJ communities to identify shovel-ready projects that we could then implement in future phases of this funding. So the planning phase is just the first phase of this, and that's what we're in right now. And so we, from a conservation perspective, community perspective, we're all on the same page. We know what the threats are. We know what we want to do. But now this next phase of this is all about partnering with the community and looking at it through the community's lens. What do you need? These are our goals. What are your goals? And how do we work together to actualize those things and bring in funding for these projects? So it's a really, really exciting concept. It's just getting underway now. We're got about 1 year under our belt to a 3-year grant. So more to come on this, but I expect that if we can be successful at this planning phase, this will be a fruit that keeps giving for Northwest Indiana in the years to come and decades. All right, and the last project I wanted to highlight is just expanded outreach with our partners at the park. And so we have this really exciting program called Great Lakes Odyssey that we've partnered with Expeditions in Education to do outreach across the Great Lakes. So that includes educating about the Indiana Dunes and taking those stories to all these other places that they visit through this Great Lakes Odyssey project. So we will have an exciting event planned in the spring that many of you will be invited to. I think there's going to be a planting day potentially tied to it this year where you can come out into the dunes. So it's a really great program. They've reached over 14,000 students through it last year alone. And it's one of those programs that keeps giving because they create online programming that it's all about working with students and schools and teachers. And so the teachers then have access to this online curriculum based on all of these visits to the national parks, and the kids just love it. So that is another example of how our outreach is now, it is Great Lakes wide, not just Northwest Indiana. So I mentioned, I know we're running late on time, so I'll just wrap up here, but I mentioned we're very committed to continuing to train the next generation of stewards. We've got an intern right now, and we're excited to bring more interns in this summer. This is a local middle school that's been helping us at our headquarters on a local conservation project. We've got people that we bring out to DC each year. So if you're looking for ways to get engaged or get younger folks engaged with this work, please send them our way. We would love that. These are just some of the events that you can come to. Green Drinks, of course, is the first one up on the list. So, but there's many other ways to get involved. So please join us. And thank you to everybody who, again, makes our work possible. We couldn't do it without you. So, all right. Any questions?
Thanks so much, Betsy. I've got one question in the chat to start. If the most resilient beach is a natural beach, could you discuss the plan that the national park has to move sand? Know that that the sand there has been pretty badly washed away.
I'm going to guess that this is referring to the Mount Baldy project specifically. Okay, great. Yes. So this is something that the park actually reached out to us early on before they, went public with any of their ideas to see if this is something that we would support. So I appreciate that they engaged with us early in the process. And the dynamic at Mount Baldy, for those of you who are familiar, that dune has been moving at a rate of sometimes up to 10 feet per year for decades. And that is because of the creation of the Michigan City Harbor directly to the east of Mount Baldy. So there is no longer a natural dynamic where, sand naturally accumulates. There's something called the littoral drift that brings sand to the beaches regularly. It's those currents again that I described. They go right along the shoreline. And then if you get sand too far out into the lake, it goes into something called the depths of closure. And then the sand's gone. It's no longer on our shore. It's no longer accumulating in our dunes. So if you disrupt the littoral drift, then you create severe erosion on the other side. And you actually need, in those situations, you need a man-made solution to fix the man-made problem, but that mimics the natural beach, right? So there you need to create sand nourishment is what I'm trying to say to bring into that space. And so the park I believe was out of a lot of good choices. It was sort of a pick your poison situation with this particularly. If they had waited any longer, the dune would start to swallow the what's called a comfort station. So the restrooms, if you're familiar there, there's electrical right there. And this dune has already swallowed structures. And there, if you look on the backside of it, there's forested dune. It's now called a tree graveyard, which is a common thing. It's not uncommon for dunes to form on top of other dunes and to change that dynamic. Again, it's that succession piece. But this is on hyperdrive in this area because of the creation of the port or of the harbor. And so what they're going to do is take the sand that has accumulated onto what's a covered parking lot now. So we haven't been able to use it in years and put it back on the beach. So that is actually, in my opinion, and S.A.V.E. Dunes' opinion, a good solution because it's at least getting sand nourishment to the front side, which is where it's eroded. And so that's the very long explanation of what's going on there and why sand, it is a man-made solution, but that is mimicking a natural solution.
Yeah, she also mentioned that the sand was dumped at Lakeview, which we know also has like pretty extreme erosion issues, and they've been working on reestablishing the beach front at Lakeview as well. So I'm sure it's in the same sentiment that years before it got redone, that beach was completely gone, hardened with rock. So now that the lake levels are lower, there is more of a beach there. So I'm guessing that they're just trying to get ahead of the lake levels by nourishing there as well.
Yeah. And that is another example of that natural beach that we want to create, where you want sandbars created during those low water periods where you get more sand. Like that's a natural process that we want to mimic so that when you do have the high water periods, you expect that. But if you've got too much scouring and all the sand is gone already, then it's not as resilient. And so then you just have a really rapid erosion problems.
Are there any questions on the Facebook page?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, so since we're very close to wrapping up time, I'm not seeing any more questions here on the chat. Um, I wanted to make an announcement about a very special event that's happening down in Indianapolis, and it's called Water Stewardship Day. And that's happening on Tuesday, January 28th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., and that is Central Time. And this is being sponsored by Indiana Conservation Voters. It'll be held at the Indiana State House. You can search very easily for Water Stewardship Day to get more information on that. And you can contact Indiana Conservation Voters to get more specific information. They're asking you to please pre-register so they can prepare and know how many people are coming. It's a great opportunity for you to be able to meet with your personal Indiana senator and representative for Michigan City. That would be Senator Rodney Pohl. And we have a brand new representative. His name is Randy Novak. He took the place of Pat Boy when she retired. So also they're offering transportation. So if you're interested in that, let them know and they'll try to work that out for people. in certain, regional areas. And did you want to make the announcement for our next green drinks?
Yeah, I've got a couple of other event announcements as well I'd like to share. I did drop the registration link for Water Stewardship Day in the chat here if anyone is interested. And I also linked to our main events page on our website that gets updated constantly with what's coming up and things to get involved, both online and in person. So we will be joined by Indiana conservation voters next month for Northwest Indiana Green Drink. So they're a great partner of ours. They're down at the State House. They're kind of our ears on the ground when we can't be down there for what's happening. So they're a great partner, and they'll be doing our annual advocacy green drinks, letting us know how we can get involved, best practices for getting in touch with our state representatives, and keeping a close eye on all of the bills that are coming down during the House session that is going right now. So we'll also be sharing more on socials about the state bills that are coming out through the lens of environmental both things. So that's all coming up in February, but I've got another event on Monday, the 19th of this month. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so hopefully folks have it off work and will be able to join us at the National Park for a winter wellness walk on the newly paved portion of the Marquette Greenway that is going to connect the Paul Douglas Environmental Center to West Beach. So we'll take to the trail there. It would be well paved and flat, so very accessible if that is a concern. And we'll hike for about an hour, and then we will wrap up at a little local bagel shop for bagels and coffee and conversations about best practices for accessing our park and our green spaces and all that good stuff. So that's coming up. And like I said, I dropped a link to other events that we're involved in, both that we're organizing and also participating with other collaborative organizations. That's really a great way that we get to where we need to go, let people work in their sectors and we work on ours, but we come together to make good things happen. So, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and feel free to share this recording when it comes out. It will be on our Facebook and in our February newsletter. So if this interested you or had a topic that you want to share with your friends and family, feel free to share it there.
It's a